Thank you very much to everybody to join us. The nature make us the men. Education make us be together. Everybody welcome. Next to us, we present Ángela Beatriz Martínez González.
Salud Mental del Instituto Nacional de Psiquiatría Ramón de la Fuente, la revista CES Psicología de la Universidad de Medellín, Colombia, revista de la Facultad de Medicina.
interpretation of suicidology, contributions, and limits. Welcome, Dr. Ángela Beatriz. Thank you very much to the production team for welcoming me. Thank you very much. And I thank to everybody who is joining us through Facebook. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, this presentation is about interpretation of suicidology, contributions, and limits, but I'm going to center in some important things about this because there's a lot of information about suicide. So today I'm not going to center my presentation in epidemiology. So we're going to center at prevention and information about the suicide. The suicide is a phenomenon multidisciplinary that it's not only individual, it's collective. So we need to understand the suicide as an individual phenomenon. And we need to understand that the experience is individual. If we talk about suicide, we have this kind of knowledge that has been building since suicidology. The North American psychology, Schneemann has built this concept in 1985. So this doctor started to build this concept as a theoretical. So we have to understand about this phenomenon and understand suicidology is among suicidology then is this knowledge which we as person have building. So and Schneemann has the man who built this concept. Since like 1940, 1945, and he in that year built the first center of psychology. And thanks to him, today we have a lot of institutions and a lot of mental health institutions. So thanks to this knowledge, we have the information of how to understand the suicide. How can we understand the people? But it's so complex that we need to have a lot of knowledge, professional knowledge. To me, the principal challenge that I want to focus in this session is to focus in the social and cultural aspects about the suicide. The suicide in this social and cultural context is one of the things that we as population, we don't see, and it's and most common, the suicide is focused on the individual problems and the individual knowledge as how this individual gets excluded from the social and cultural context media. The culture, the social, the politicals, etc., are things that are involving in the suicide how the sociocultural aspects influence in the suicide. what do we talk when we talk about social cultural aspects? When we talk about this, we talk about two models: the social cultural medical context that understand the individual since the personality, psychology, the religion, all of these form the individual. And then the biomedical model, because this biomedical context is different from the social and the cultural context. So we need to understand that biomedical and sociocultural contexts are completely different. And we need to know since where we are seeing the suicidal context. If we see each patient with suicide problems only from biomedical model, we aren't seeing the full problem, because the full problem of suicide is social, cultural, political, and obviously biomedical. So we need to know since where we're seeing the patient and where we're seeing the context of this each patient.
del suicidio. Y aquí vemos precisamente que tenemos todo este contexto de la desigualdad. Puede ser que una persona...
Where's the context he's in through?
¿Es hombre? ¿Es mujer?
Is he a man? Is he a woman? What's his, her age?
¿Es maya? ¿Es chontal? ¿Es yaqui? ¿Tarahumara?
Is he ethnic? Will those aspects are what we need to know when we deconstruct what's his stories. If he lives in the north, if he lives in the south, all of those aspects are important in the suicidal conductal. So we need to know, we need to understand the patients through those aspects, because that person needs support from institutions. But if we see each patient only from the biomedical model, the states, the institutions doesn't connect with each patient. So that's important. We need to understand each patient from biomedical and from sociocultural. All the political models all political models influence in each patient, influence in each individual. So it's not the same suicide conductal in Cuba, in Mexico, in the United States. So we need to see that sociocultural influence in each patient. We need to know where we are, where the patient is, what is its culture. Okay, so far we know that cultural variables have a huge impact in the suicidal conductal. The cultural variables, it's a risk factor to each individual. So as long as we study the culture, as long as we study the sociocultural context of each patient, we can understand better the individual roles are also risk factors, because we need to know the geographic ubication, the society ubications. For example, in Michoacan, how we understand when a person suicides, how we understand when a person suicides in the north, in the south, what are the beliefs about the suicide in each state, in each geographic ubication. because suicide has a lot of stigma. We need to understand what are those stigmas in Mexico, in this society, in our country, because we don't have to forget that suicidal was a part of our history, and cultural speaking, it was a huge part of our history. So today we have Canada, United States of America, making new researches trying to understand the suicidal. Today we have depression, anxiety, and mental health disease as how those influence the person and the society, and how this information about this disease influence in the individual search for help, and how these individuals go and search for help. If we make a campaign about mental disease and we wait to the person to search for the help, we don't get the results that we are waiting for, because since there, we need to understand that the person is influenced by the culture, but a lot of stigmas. So if I understand the culture about the suicide in a certain people, in a certain patient, we can understand better how can we help them, how can we help each patient. And the importance of context. Here, the public health is very, very important. There's a lot of manuals, a lot of international manuals that are to understand and help each individual patient, but those needs to be adapted to each context, to each culture, to each country, because it has to consider the social, cultural, political, religion factors, and how the health structure is in each country. So here we have a research in the southern of Mexico about a goddess, a suicide goddess of the Mayan culture, and how this culture about suicide has been here since a lot of time. So that gives us an information about what is the meaning of suicide in Yucatan. So how can I expect to have results, to have positive results, if I don't see the worldview about the culture, about this Mayan culture influence in the Yucatan people? So we have these Nahuatl people that when they felt that they won't be useful for their society, for their people, they started to isolate each self. And then they started to take suicidal conductals. There are elements that are right now in research about what is the most affected population, what is the most ethnic population affected by suicide. For example, there are a lot of countries where suicide was penalized. We have religion sometimes as a protection factor about the suicide. Why the culture can help to avoid suicide? Because if we understand all the stigmas, all the social rejection when a person have suicidal conductals, we can understand better. And for example, in researches, there's a lot of falsifications of papers because the papers doesn't reflect the reality. The researchers hide a lot of information because the paper are influenced by its own culture. Because, for example, when we see the news, we mostly see that a person who committed suicide in the news appears as this person dies at a crash accident. This person was murdered by. another person. So this kind of information that has been hid, it's a problem when we try to understand the suicide. And for example, talking about gender, we need to understand how to be men means to have a behavior different as if you were a woman, because we as men, we can, for example, we can cry, we can express our feelings. So that kind of stigmas, that kind of social pressure is what is affecting the understanding of suicidal. So how can we understand the suicide if, for example, in the politics, in the social media, in the culture, it's influenced by all these paradigms? So if, for example, in the politics, they make strategies about suicide, they are going to be influenced by all the stigmas, by all the cultural influence about the suicide. So we need to design a better public political strategies to understand the suicide. That is not only limited to understand the factor risks, the epidemiology. We need to understand the social, cultural aspects about the suicide. And right now, there are a lot of research instruments to understand these kind of social, cultural factors. So how can we break the paradigm? So how can we break this paradigm? We need to start breaking this paradigm with an interdisciplinary approach. Integral strategies, multifactories, so for example, right now, there are a lot of people that have been prepared, that have been trained to, for example, in Los Angeles, answer the suicide line prevention, telephonic line prevention. So these kind of actions make us help to break the paradigm of suicide. We need to understand, since last year to right now, how many researches are in Mexico. What is the information that we have that we hadn't have in the last year. How did we apply those researches? So the small amount of these researches, of this information, reflects that we aren't preventing the suicide. We aren't understanding the suicide because there aren't primary prevention, secondary prevention. We don't have that. One of the challenges is the prediction of suicidal behavior. How can we prevent a person to commit suicide? We need to start building new theories, new technologies. So today, the new technologies, the brain data, the MRA are influencing right now in a positive way in how can we understand the suicidal. Multidisciplinary make us understand that we don't have to see a phenomenon just from one kind of view. We need to abort each problem from different ways, from scientific, medical. So we need to understand that the suicide is not just about health, about how the person is social related, but right now we need to see the suicide as some kind of social justice, because that person need to receive the appropriate help. The social justice needs to support those people. And how, for example, and how the inequality is a factor that influences in each person, and how those persons can access to the health institutions. So we need more researches and more proof, more solid proof. We need to understand the scientific researches and how those researches can be applied into the professional practice, and how can we help the people with the information that those researchers give to us. So I want to close this presentation with this phrase and how each year we collect new information and how each year we do new researches and how those researches influence in our suicidal patients' attentions. One of the questions was how, in the actual context, we as family, we as friends, we as partners, how can we prevent, how can we help those patients to avoid suicidal conductals? Another question is, what can we do? What actions can we do to break the stigmas in the suicidal context? How can we support those people to break the stigma of social and cultural aspects? I'm going to answer those questions with just one answer. What kind of campaign or what kind of message can I do to prevent suicide? And the answer is that I have to do a diagnosis before of doing the campaign. Where am I going to work? What is the demographic ubication where I'm going to work? So the campaign is going to be adapted to the socio-cultural aspects of the demographic region that I am studying, that I am applying the campaign. For example, we're going to do a campaign in Chiapas. According to INEGI, there's no suicide in Chiapas. But these results has to do with the social, cultural, and political influence about the suicide, because in Chiapas there's a lot of suicide, but those aren't reported. In Chiapas, we have these ethnical groups, for example, Mayas, Tojolabales. They see the suicide as some culture with a culture significant, but as a positive way. For them, suicide was something good, something that has to happen to everybody. And for some, it was kind of a way to honor their gods. So we need those things are the things that we need to see when we do a campaign. We need to see that socio-cultural influence about the suicide. And according to that, we can apply a campaign. Because, for example, I can go to a Maya and say, hey, if you feel sad, if you feel blue, if you had headaches, etc., go to your health center for help. Because that is not a campaign to avoid suicide. That is not a successful campaign. Now, speaking about the bullying is some social factor that is influencing a lot of young people, and it has to wait to the new technologies and the new content they see. And we as parents, we as family, we need to have a good communication with them, because one of the problems is usually the family, because the family doesn't have a good communication with the patients with suicidal conduct. We have to be aware about those suicide symptoms. Not everything is part of the growing. Not everything is about part of the teenagers. So we need to have a great communication with our kids. And regarding to the bullying, we need to focus more on that, because here in Mexico, in the institutions, a lot of institutions doesn't see the bullying as a real problem. And not always we have this support from them. So we need to do campaigns from the medical aspects, from the political aspects. So can we make a positive impact and eliminate the stigma that suicide we would like to thanks to the Dr. Beatriz. And right now we're going to give her